Start the meeting. I want to thank everybody for being here. The time now, I believe it's 9 o'clock on, excuse me, Wednesday, March 16, 2022. Calling this Ethics Board meeting into session. Ms. Spivey or someone else, can someone take roll call for us?
Mr. Young, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Schaefer, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Hammoud,
Good morning, present.
Dr. Carnell,
Present on Zoom.
Chair Pinkins.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to sort of deviate off script for a quick moment, if I can. Excuse me, if I can. I just want to take this time before we get started. I just want to take this time, and I think in that roll call, Mr. Thomas is here. He may not have heard,
I
but
didn't have my microphone on and I apologize for that.
no, that's okay. So we know for the record that Mr. Thomas is here. And also, I just want to go off the record, go off script just for a quick moment and welcome Ms. Spivey, who is new to the board, Mina Spivey. Just want to thank you for joining us. And also, I want to welcome our newest attorney for the board, who is Mr. Charles Longstreet. I see Mr. Longstreet is present. Thank you, sir, for being here. I hope that everyone has had the opportunity to meet Mr. Longstreet. If not, obviously you'll have time over the next several months. Getting back to our agenda, which is item B on our agenda, which is approval of the January 19, 2022 meeting minutes. Has everyone received a copy of the meeting minutes from the January 22nd meeting?
I did.
Yes.
And has everyone had the opportunity to review those meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any questions or concerns regarding the meeting minutes in the last meeting?
No.
I
Okay,
move to adopt the minutes.
there a second? The motion has been moved and seconded to adopt the meeting minutes from the January 2022 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it. So moved. Moving on to the next item of our agenda, item C, we have unfinished business. Under item number 1, we have the advisory opinion request from Mr. Swadad Altamimi, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing Mr. Altamimi's last name or his first name as well. I think Mr. Longstreet, I think you had the opportunity to look and review the advisory opinion. I think you provided a copy for today's agenda and package. I believe all members have received a copy of the opinion. If anyone has not received a copy of the memorandum of opinion and recommendation, please notify the board at this time. And also at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Longstreet. Mr. Longstreet, if you could sort of briefly apprise this board of the request as well as your recommendation.
Good morning, members of the board. First, I'd like to thank you for my selection to this board. I find it to be an honor and a deep responsibility to hold this position, and I would just like to thank you for your selection. Going into my memorandum and opinion and recommendation in this particular case, Mr. Saud Altamimi is an employee of the Public Services Department, for which he is an engineer. It appears from his request, he's requesting an opinion from the Ethics Board to determine whether he is allowed to or he should seek employment with an employer, the HNTB Corporation of Detroit, Michigan. HNTB Corporation is an engineering corporation that mainly deals with infrastructure. They also do have contracts with the County of Wayne. Mr. Altamimi is seeking alternative employment with this particular company. His request for an ethics opinion was a little vague in reference to what kind of job he was looking for. However, pursuant to the standards of the ethics ordinance, it appears that his seeking a job with that particular company would violate the ethics rules. I've spelled out in the applicable ethics standards, the applicable standards that would apply, which will be conflict of interest, subsection A3C, conflict of interest. There's a conflict of interest whenever a public servant knows or should reasonably be expected to know that they or a relative, Section C, has negotiated or is negotiating employment with a county business or other party who is likely to become a party to a contract, such as a prospective contractor or consultant. Based on information, the belief, and research, I have gained the knowledge that HNTB has contracts with the County of Wayne. Thus, Mr. Altamimi seeking employment with that particular company would violate the statute. Excuse.
Okay, is it on? Okay, just for the record, can we note that Mr. Schaefer has just arrived and he is present? Morning, Mr. Schaefer. So I'm sorry, get back to you, Mr. Longstreet.
I was done, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, does anyone have any questions or concerns for Mr. Longstreet? And Mr. Longstreet, what is your recommendation at this time, sir?
At this time, my recommendation would be to notify Mr. Altamimi that the County of Wayne does have contracts with HNTB and that his seeking employment with HNTB would violate the ethics rules, particularly standard 40.4A3C. And I believe he should receive notice of such.
Have you been in contact with Mr. Altamimi?
I have not been in contact with Mr. Altamimi.
Okay, so at this time, the question before this board is to adopt the recommendation by Mr. Longstreet with respect to the request for advisory opinion from Mr. Swadad Altamimi. At this time, the chair will entertain any motions to adopt Mr. Longstreet's recommendation.
Make a motion to adopt it.
Second.
I will second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the recommendation of our attorney for the board, Mr. Charles Longstreet, regarding the request for an advisory opinion from Mr. Altamimi, that his request would actually, what he is seeking would actually violate the ethics ordinance and serve as a conflict of interest. So all in favor indicate by saying aye. Adopt the
Aye.
motion.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying no. All right, the ayes have it, so moved.
Mr.
Longstreet.
Pinkins, may I ask a procedural question?
Sure, sir. Go
We
right
don't
ahead.
have a draft letter in front of us. And this has been hanging around, at least this request has been hanging around since January. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be prudent to ask Mr. Longstreet to prepare his letter subject to your approval so that it's not held up necessarily for another month. I don't have the ethics ordinance in front of me, but somehow I remember that there's a time trigger in there regarding requests for ethics opinions. I could be wrong on that.
The time limit is 14 days in which we receive the request for ethics opinion that we have to review it. It's kind of silent in reference to when we have to provide the response, only that we have to have a hearing within 120 days of the request.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, what I would do is this. I would like to make a motion, since my memory may not be 100% on regarding the timing requirements, but there is timing requirements. Since we all agree on the content of his memorandum, I would make a motion that Mr. Longstreet prepare a letter reflecting what's in his memorandum regarding the law and his rationale, and that it need only be approved by Mr. Pinkins.
Okay, so at this time, we have a motion before this board.
I second that.
Longstreet to Mr. Altamimi regarding his request for advisory.
Well, I was hoping that you would be able to approve it for the content. I know you're not going to sign it. Mr. Longstreet would sign it, but I don't see the need to put it over until April. I just don't see the need for that. I'm sure he's going to tailor his letter to reflect what's in his memorandum to us, and I'd be satisfied with you approving it and authorizing him to sign it.
Question is, it has been moved and seconded, to have Mr. Favor of that motion indicate by saying aye.
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 All right, moving on to our next.
Chair.
Yes.
Just a clarification or suggestion, since we received his request in an email, and I know some employees still working remotely, instead of letter, because we mentioned letter, can we respond by email? I mean, I don't know what any thoughts around that. Just to be timely, the response, I know we mentioned letter. Can we put that recommendation to Mr. El-Tamimi by email?
I can do that as well. I'll use the most effective means possible to transmit the information. Also, I presume that upon the board's approval of my recommendation, that I would immediately forward that information or act on my recommendation and provide Mr. Altamimi with the decision of the board. That was presumed to be done immediately upon the approval of the opinion and the recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I understand, Mr. Longstreet, are you going to reply via email and letter to Mr. Altamimi? Is that what we're before this?
I can do
board?
both. That's not a problem.
Okay. Ms. Mahmood, does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. All right, moving on to the next item of business, which is item D, new business. Right now, we have the election of officers, the chairperson and vice chairperson. As noted, your chair's term came to an end in February of this year. Myself and Dr. Carnell serve as your chair and vice chair. Obviously, I would like to serve as your chair again for the remainder time of my time on this board. I think my time is up the end of this year, and it's been a duly pleasure serving on this board with such outstanding members. So at this time, we will have to move to select a new chair and vice chair for this board.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think there is one matter of old business before we move to new business. I saw in the meeting minutes that there was an open discussion in reference to my selection. That particular issue was closed, and I believe pursuant to parliamentary procedure that discussion needs to be closed prior to moving to new business. I just want to make the chair aware.
Open matter before this board, which is under old business regarding the selection of the new attorney for the board. If I'm correct, is that what you're saying, Mr. Longstreet?
There is, and I just think the discussion just needs to be closed before we move to new business.
So what we're doing is going to, since that's still, this is a new session and it's old business, we're going to reprise that issue. And we'll discuss that issue and put that matter to rest. So the issue at the last meeting was we selected an attorney for the board. There was, we went through the proper, the subcommittee went through the channels and vetted various members. Mr. Longstreet was the highest vote getting member. We did come here and put all three members before the board, but it was moved to the highest selected person, which was Mr. Longstreet. Mr. Longstreet was voted on and approved unanimously. Afterwards, we were notified that since Mr. Longstreet was not on the approved attorney list, that there will be some delay, and it was delay in getting him approved and onto that list. We have since done some back and forth, your chair, as well as we did have some participation from various members of procurement and corporation counsel's office, as well as I believe corporation counsel was involved as well. Matter has been, Mr. Longstreet was selected. He was placed onto the list of approved attorneys list, I believe it was last month. And his contract was subsequently sent to him and signed by him and submitted back to procurement as well as corporation counsel. I believe we received it and he has been duly installed. So at this point, at this time, If there's any discussion on the matter, I think the matter is pretty much closed, but if anyone wants to add any discussion to it at this time, the chair is open for that.
I don't have a point of discussion on it. I would just like to say that if there is any doubt that we have selected him as our lawyer in anybody's mind, whether they're people present at this meeting or on the commission itself, I would just like to lay the matter to rest. So I will say this, if it is needed today, I make a motion that we select and approve Mr. Longstreet as our counsel, if it's needed, if the chair feels it's needed.
So there's a motion before this board. The chair, I do think, Mr. Thomas, the chair would think that for the record, it is a good motion. And for the record, it can be made. I would allow it just to put the matter to rest. And just so all parties viewing this, looking at it from the outside, understand that Mr. is the attorney for this board. So there's motion been made. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. So there's been a motion made and seconded. And the question is to fully state that Mr. Longstreet has been adopted and accepted and retained as the attorney for the Wayne County Ethics Board. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it, so moved. Let the record reflect this. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Longstreet. All right, putting that matter to rest, I do think we're getting back to item D on our agenda, which is number 1, the election of officers. Again, the chairperson and vice chairperson.
Make a motion to nominate Mr. Pinkins as the chairman.
Second.
Schaefer. There's been a motion made and seconded that the chair, Mr. Pinkins, continue to serve as the chair for this board. Favor, or if there's any discussion. Mr. Schaefer, you made the motion. If you would like some discussion on the matter, sir.
Don't believe there's a need for discussion. You've done an excellent job and we're lucky to have you.
All right, if there's no discussion, the motion has been made and seconded that Mr. Pinkins continue to serve as the chair of this board throughout the duration of this term. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it. It's so moved. Thank you so much. I'll gladly continue to serve as your chair. Moving on to the next matter, your vice chairperson, Dr. Carnell, has served as your vice chairperson. She has been dutifully an expertise. Dr. Carnell, we're still working on your amendments to the Ethics Board Ordinance. I think we're going to address that with Mr. Longstreet. But if there's any motions for vice chairperson at this time.
Chair, if I may.
Dr. Carnell.
I have enjoyed my time serving. I think it's someone else's turn to serve as vice chair. So I would like to nominate Mr. Thomas.
Thomas.
I second that motion.
Well, did he accept the nomination
Yeah,
first?
first he has to accept.
I will accept that nomination. I'm very proud to be nominated and I appreciate the nomination. Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, so there's been a nomination for vice chair, Mr. Philip Thomas. Mr. Thomas has accepted the nomination.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Chair Pinkins.
yes.
I believe because Dr. Cardell is present via Zoom that she's not allowed to make the motion. So if we could get another member to make the motion.
Can't make the nomination. Okay, all right. So if there's another nomination.
Yep, I can nominate Mr. Philip Thomas to be the vice chair.
Okay, there's a nomination from Ms. Hammoud. Again, Mr. Thomas, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Okay, so there has been a nomination for Mr. Thomas to serve as the vice chair of this board. Is there a motion as such?
Motion to have a vote and appoint Mr. Thomas as vice chair.
That motion, Mr. Schaefer. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Lewis has seconded the motion. So the motion has been made and seconded that Mr. Philip Thomas serve as vice chairman of this board, chairperson of this board. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it. So move. Congratulations, Mr. Thomas. Look forward to working with you, sir, as we have been working together. Moving on to the next item of business on our agenda, which is, I believe it's item number E, or F, excuse me, item E, which is any other matters that's probably before this board at this time. So at this time, is there any other matters before this board?
I'd just like to
Yes,
suggest
Ms. Lewis.
that we close out those interviewees that we interviewed to let them know that we have.
Yes, Ms. Lewis, and thank you so much for bringing that up, Ms. Lewis. I do think those interviewees, and particularly the runner-ups, I believe we did mention to them that they will receive a call back either way. And I do think we need to reach out to them just to thank them and to let them know the outcome. So I'm not sure if that would need a motion to be made for that, or if this board could just note it and we'll reach out to them. Question. Board, I'm not sure how that would work. Maybe Mr. Longstreet can advise us as a board, how would we respond?
Perhaps I would believe that a letter from the chair indicating that a new attorney has been selected would suffice. You would thank them for their participation, and that would be the end, I would imagine.
All right, well, sounds like that's the advice, and that's the advice I believe the chair will take, and we will send out a form letter for them, which this chair would sign and let them know that the chair has been selected. Thank you for this.
For the
Okay.
chair, if
Yes, Ms. Hamud.
you need any recommendation on like drafting such a letter, since I'm a,
Well, it sounds to me,
I may
Ms.
be able
Hamud,
to
it sounds to me, Ms. Hamud, that you are saying that you
No,
want to draft a
I
letter
volunteer
and
myself.
send it to the chair for the chair to
I
review
can
it and
definitely
sign.
work with you, no
And I
problem.
think this chair is going to accept that, Ms. Hamud. I think that is what you're.
No problem.
So, and thank you so much for that, Ms. Hamud.
I will send those names of those people that were.
Okay, perfect.
I think everyone has my email address, so you can send it over to me. Thank you again, Ms. Hamud, for that. All right, so moving on to our next item of business, if there's no other matters that's before this board. Oh, yes, Ms.
Just
Hamud.
a follow up on something we discussed previously about the proposed changes to the enrolled ordinances.
Yes.
So is there any update? I know we had asked the previous attorney to be able to see if he can get the copy, and I think we received that. Did anyone not have the proposed? You didn't have it? Okay, so I wasn't sure. I know Dr. Carnell is here, so I don't know if you have the marked up copy. I know you worked on that project, but I just want to make sure that we're following up on it, especially that we had like some good recommendations that we wanted to present to the commission. So any status or follow-up?
Ms.
update on
Hamud,
that?
let me turn it over to Mr. Longstreet. I believe Mr. Longstreet was given all of Mr. Domzel, who served as the interim attorney after Mr. Williams sort of unexpectedly left us. So I believe Mr. Domzel did send out those changes. We did address that in a meeting. Mr. Longstreet, did you receive copies of those changes in the information that was delivered to you?
Yes, as part of the last in-year report, the changes were or a part of that is an attachment, which included Dr. Carnell's changes. I've had an opportunity to read over or actually view the last 2 years of meetings I haven't had an opportunity to see what the issues were in reference to the changes that needed to be made to the ethics ordinance. I believe my read of it, I found even more additional changes that I thought needed to be made. Some vague and ambiguous definitions I think need to be more clear. I also think that the investigative powers of the board needs to be added into the ordinance. So I think my advice would be at this point would be to create a subcommittee to review any and all changes that need to be made to this ordinance to clear up some of the definitions, such as the definition of loyalty and conflict of interest. I think the conflict of interest definition is a bit vague. I think there needs to be more clarity in regards to that. There are other issues that seem to conflict with each other, especially the definition of conflict of interest. So I think a subcommittee should be established to go over the ethics ordinance to clear up any ambiguities that may exist.
Chair.
And
Through the
thank you for that. I think Dr. Carnell, and I know this has been sort of Dr. Carnell's sort of pet, sort of baby here that she's working very diligently on. So I'm gonna turn this over to you, Dr. Carnell.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mr. Longstreet, thank you for your thorough review of the ordinance. They aren't my changes, they are the board's changes. We went through the ordinance together, and those were the recommendations from the board. We do understand that there are some ambiguities in the language. We know that we couldn't tackle all of it at one time. So we sort of did it in steps to say, this is what we could do based on the information that we have at the time. I do also know that these changes were sent to the commission. So I don't know where they stand on the commission's docket or agenda. But if they haven't been formally presented to the commission and we can move them back and create a subcommittee, I have no objections to that.
Well, pursuant to, I've reviewed the videos of the last 2 years worth of meetings. It seems like from our view that they were submitted to the commission. However, there was no action taken on the changes. So I think the opportunity to bring it back to a subcommittee is there.
Maybe, and I'll
Mr.
just throw
Thomas.
this out for discussion, Mr. Pinkins, maybe what we may want to do is begin, the idea of a subcommittee is a great idea, but maybe what we would want to do would be to get a letter to the commission, lest they contemplate or think about adopting those changes. Should we not get a letter out to the commission, letting them know that we submitted those proposed changes back on such and such date? We have new counsel that we're working with, and we are going to do an updated evaluation and perhaps reaffirm those suggestions, some of them or all of them, and maybe make new suggestions. But I think that a new council coming in at this juncture gives us an opportunity, as the board currently sits, to take a look at things again. So that would be my approach, and maybe Mr. Longstreet could do a letter to them, letting them know and give them a tentative time frame, maybe 60 days or 90 days. I don't think that this is something that could necessarily be decided at one meeting, like the April meeting or the May meeting. So I think we need some time, Mr. Pinkins, and that would be my suggestion.
Thank you for that, Mr. Thomas, and for all the comments. I will say that I wish Ms. Johnson was here. Ms. Johnson, in my understanding, is the person who was taking this matter to the commission. She was following it along to know, because there's been some great points raised. One is we submitted the proposed recommendation changes to the commission. We'd like to know if it was acted on, how far in the process it was. If it wasn't, then yes, she is. Ms. Johnson, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you, and thank you for being here. Can you advise this board where we are with the recommendations that were submitted with respect to the changes to the ethics ordinance? I'm sure you've been following all the comments that's been made today. We do have new counsel. He has raised some very valid concerns with changes that should be made and should be sort of broadened in some of the language in the ethics ordinance. Would it be best to withdraw and sort of come back and make additional changes? Definitely, we would hate to have those changes be sort of adopted or addressed by the commission, and then we have to turn around and make other changes. What would be your suggestion, and how far along are those recommendations or those changes that we have submitted back? I think that was 2 years ago.
Yes, I believe it was in December of 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or 2020. So the commission is in receipt of the revisions. My office is in receipt of the revisions due to some staffing issues and COVID. Those revisions have not yet been presented to committee. I did have a conversation with your last council. Was my understanding that this body was going to review the ordinance again for possible additional changes. We have not yet reviewed those additional changes. I'm not even sure if they've been received. I think at this point, a letter to the commission advising the commission that the body will decided to take another look at the ordinance to update your revisions, not to review and take action on the revisions that were previously submitted would be appropriate. Once those new revisions are received, those items will be reviewed by commission staff and then submitted to committee for consideration.
Okay, all right. So thank you so much for that, Ms. Johnson. So I think we have it. Mr. Longstreet, if we could get out a letter to the commission as such, stating that not to act on those revisions that we submitted, that we are going to look at additional revisions to make. I do think, again, I agree with Mr. Thomas, but I do think that we need to jump on this very quickly. It took us some time back in, I believe it was 2019, 2018, the summer, going through line by line. So I do like the idea of a committee selected to tackle this issue. The chair is prepared today to appoint a committee, members to begin that task, because we do know after we go through and make changes, however long it's going to take for the committee to even look at it and even consider. They may not adopt it, but they may consider them, my understanding. So if that's the case, the chair is prepared today to appoint a committee, a subcommittee, to take on this task. If all members are in favor, if there's a motion that we need to make to that, then the chair is willing to entertain a motion. If not, the chair, I would say on its own motion, can move forward if it's approved, and we appoint a subcommittee on this matter.
I'll make a motion. If a motion is needed, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. What in the call of your motion is?
Pardon me?
All of your motion is to.
Well, to appoint a subcommittee, to have a subcommittee appointed to review the ethics ordinance with new counsel and come back with recommendations. Maybe we'll adopt some of the prior recommendations. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll make new ones, but we're taking a fresh look at it. It's my understanding. And the only thing that I would like to make sure, and I would want part of my motion, I think we've got to give ourselves a couple months to do this. I don't think that working with new counsel, we can do it in prior to April. So maybe my motion would be that the subcommittee come back with a recommendation by the June meeting. Let me ask Mr. Longstreet, do you think that would be sufficient?
I don't think we should be hasty in making a decision. So whatever time is necessary or appropriate to make those changes, I think would be sufficient. I don't think there should be a timetable.
Okay.
Only that when the subcommittee is prepared with the appropriate changes, should those changes be presented to the board for approval. I don't think that we need to rush or be hasty, or it's been sitting on the table for almost 2 years. So I don't think if we take another 4 months that it's going to kill us. So I think the most appropriate thing would be is to form the subcommittee. Let the subcommittee take as long as they need to take to make the appropriate changes and take the due diligence that it takes for something this important, to take the time, go through it thoroughly, make the proper changes, add to the ordinance if necessary, and then present it to the board. I don't think there should be a timetable as to when it should happen.
Excellent. Well, I won't include a timetable in my motion. My motion is just to appoint a subcommittee.
Okay, a motion has been made and it has been seconded. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. So a motion has been made and seconded to adopt the subcommittee. Mr. Thomas has had some discussion. Ms. Hammoud, I'll turn to you.
A point of discussion here, just I guess my thought process in light of the information that we know, we already made what I thought it's very important recommendation before. I think it's for the benefit of everyone to be involved in, all the members of Ethics Board, because when we went through it, really, we went through the ordinance line item by line item. So I think even from I don't want to use corporate like development or skill, but I think it's beneficial for all the Ethics Board members to be involved. And I know when we do a subcommittee, we are limited to like maybe 3 members because we don't want to have a quorum. So, I mean, my suggestion is to have a working session open and go over at least the changes that we have. So if Ms. Johnson already have those that we, changes that we submitted to the commission, maybe she can offer those and we have a working session. If needs be to have additional, then you can do the subcommittee, but at least at the beginning for the newer board members to know what were the recommendation, I think it's beneficial to be able to go over them. So
You're the chair.
Just before you I think that's Ms. Johnson. I understand for a subcommittee, you can have you can have a quorum of members there. My understanding is to have more than 3 members, which for this board will be a quorum if you have more than 3, you have to make it open to the public. So we did our subcommittee meetings via Zoom. They weren't open to the public just because we were under the quorum. We had 3 members. We could have a subcommittee with more than 3 members who would just open it to the public like we do with the Zoom meetings. I think that's something that could be allowed. Ms. Johnson, I think you were chiming in.
No, that was Ms. Carnell.
Dr. Carnell.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Hammoud that due to the importance of the ordinance that we should have all members participate, at least at the initial stage.
Thank you for that, Dr. Carnell. Okay, well, it sounds like we have a motion. It's been moved, it's been seconded. Or I understand there's been some discussion as to possibly having all members of the participate in those changes. I, for one, I agree with Ms. Hammoud that we did make some very important changes. We spent a lot of time going over this line by line. I think you remember your chair was reading into the record each line of the ethics ordinance.
Yep.
Time consuming. I think we did make some very valid changes. I'm not sure I'm ready to go through that process again as the whole board. The chair does like the idea of a subcommittee meeting. I know we met once a week. We could have pushed it up to more times if needed be. I think we were on an aggressive schedule. If we still have the capacity to do the Zoom meetings, I think a chair subcommittee could meet in that fashion. All those who would like to be a part of that subcommittee, obviously the chair would appoint to that subcommittee to give input. So right now, what I'm going to do is, since we have a motion before this board on the floor, it has been seconded. We're going to put it to a vote.
There's a point of discussion, Mr. Pinkins, because I want to make sure that Ms. Hammoud's and Dr. Carnell's concerns are allayed somehow.
Well, yes, Mr. Thomas, this is your motion, so I'm going to open it and give you the floor back.
All right. Mr. Longstreet, I'd like to ask you a question. We're at the point now where there's discussion about having a subcommittee or having the entire group work on it together. And there's a downside to it, and that is that it would be held up by requirements that everything be public. So I guess what I would wonder would be this. If the motion passes, would it be possible to have you update us periodically so that everybody knows what's going on? In other words, there's a subcommittee working with you, but it's not all behind closed doors because the other members would know each meeting, what's going on, what's being discussed. For example, just an example, a determination may be made that 75 or maybe 90% of what was already recommended be included in there. So there'd be a recommendation that that be adopted, but there may be additional changes, or there may be some proposed changes that we no longer want to support. What type of support mechanism could be put in place to allay the concerns of two of our members, that everybody be in the mix, everybody have an opportunity to know what's going on?
Well, what I would suggest is that the subcommittee provide a monthly report in regards to the progress of the changes in the ethics ordinance. That would allow the members who are not a part of the subcommittee to read the proposed changes, make any suggestions that they want, have those changes presented back to the subcommittee for review and change and or addition. I think that would be the best method. I think it would be more efficient to have a subcommittee of a few members make the proposed changes, present those to the board at large, have the board at large review them, have each individual member of the board make their suggestions as to what they believe the changes should be added, deleted, so on and so forth, and then have those changes presented back to the subcommittee for addition until we get to a final ethics ordinance.
I would just like to ask Ms. Amoud and Dr. Carnell, would your concerns about full participation be addressed if that approach were adopted?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that proposal.
I'm okay with it. I think that new members on the board should be part of the subcommittee. Those of us who have already gone through this, I'm with Mr. Pinkins. I'm not crazy about going through it again. The recommendations are there. I think fresh eyes looking at it is worth reviewing or worth doing. And so that's my recommendation.
Thank you,
It was
Dr.
very tedious. It was very tedious, very time consuming.
It was.
Yeah.
But it was.
And
But it was very
to
important.
be able to make the process smoother and be transparent with the public before they actually submit, their complaint. I mean, certain things we put in there is based on what we saw as a board. So yeah, I agree that maybe the newer member part of the.
Thank you for that. Let me just ask this question of Ms. Spivey or Ms. Kungura, whoever can answer this question. Do we have the capacity for a subcommittee to have members meet via Zoom and have it open to the public? I know we met in our subcommittee weekly. Can the subcommittee meet as often as it likes? Is there a capacity for that? Also when conducting the Zoom hearings?
Through the chair, this is Ms. Johnson. May I respond to that question, please?
Yes, Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
So some of this is going to depend on the parameters for this committee and the number of members. If there are less than a quorum, depending on how it's set up in the parameters, it may be possible to have Zoom meetings. It may be possible. If it is more than a quorum, Zoom meetings are not an option under the law. So what I was actually going to do under public comment, but I would do that now, is ask Mr. Longstreet to contact me because there are several procedural matters that I've noticed during this meeting and some of the discussion that needs to be addressed that hasn't been addressed yet. So I was going to ask him to give me a call so that we can ensure that those things are addressed and properly, the information properly provided to the board.
So let me just follow up on your question, on your response, Ms. Johnson. So you say if it's a Zoom meeting, it's more than, if it's a quorum, it's not possible under the law with the public being present? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. You cannot have a meeting of a quorum and have it be electronic.
Okay. Okay.
So you cannot have a meeting of a quorum and have it be electronic. You also cannot have member participation electronically. Again, there are some procedural matters I think need to be discussed with regards to statutes, law, cases, and the current state of the OMA. So I was just going to ask Mr. Longstreet to give my office a call at some point before your next meeting so we can discuss those matters.
This board, then a quorum will be 4 members, at least 4 members. Then, so if it's 3 members, then they can have it via Zoom. What about does it have to be open to the public? Can the public attend those meetings?
Again, it depends on how the committee is set up and what the process and procedures are. It's a little more complicated than just saying yes or no. I've been through this with the Wayne County Commission, so I'm very intimately familiar with the cases and the law. And that's why I'm suggesting that Mr. Longstreet give me a call because there are some nuances that need to be understood and addressed before I can answer that question.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's get back to the motion that's before this board. There's a motion and has been seconded to select for the adoption of a subcommittee to address the changes and recommended changes to the ethics ordinance. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed indicate by saying no. Okay, the ayes have it. A subcommittee will be selected to address the issues and changes, recommended changes to the ethics ordinance. The chair is going to select members of the ethics ordinance, for the subcommittee at this time. Generally, a chairperson is appointed and members are also appointed. Once the chair is selected, obviously the chair can select whoever he or she likes to serve as the clerk of the subcommittee at this time. Forgive me if your time does not allow, please let the chair know at this time. But I would appoint a subcommittee of Mr. Thomas, Ms. Hammoud, Ms. Lewis, this time, Dr. Carnell would like to be a part of it as well. I would like Dr. Carnell, obviously I understand, Dr. Carnell, you did spend a great deal of time before. This board values your input as well as Ms. Hammoud's input because you both were there at the initial point. However, we do have new eyes and we do need to have those new eyes looking at things fresh. Again, I do know time constraints, and again, not knowing what the parameters or what the Zoom obligations may or may not allow, I would like to see Mr. Thomas serve as chair of that subcommittee. Okay, if any members have any questions or concerns, please bring it to the chair at this time.
To the chair.
Yes, Ms.
I'm not, thank you. I'm not sure of my time commitment on this issue, but I'll try to participate as much as I possibly can.
Thank you for that, Dr. Carnell. Okay, so at night now we have Mr. Thomas, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Hammoud, Dr. Carnell, if your time permits. Okay, any questions, Ms. Hammoud?
So we need to select the 3 members for the subcommittee?
Yes, and that's just been selected at this time.
Dr.
So,
Carnell and
well,
Mr.
actually,
Thomas?
3. If it's 3, it'll be Mr. Thomas, Ms. Lewis, and yourself.
As I said, I mean, I think I would be fine part of like the larger board to review after the subcommittee. So like my comment here is not to be part of like a subcommittee. I will be available when this subcommittee, so if Mr. Schaefer is interested and, his time allows, I would say maybe Mr. Schaefer and Ms. Lewis. And if Mr. Thomas may be better to be able to take a look. I mean, I have my own, draft of what we recommended before. So, but I suggest someone else to be on the subcommittee. I'll be available, part of the larger board, on a monthly basis to review what you recommended, whether you agree with us or not, and only to be able to provide you like the experience and the why we recommended what we recommended in case like you don't agree with our recommendation.
I like that.
Fair?
Well.
Just to be able to limit it, so this way you don't have the problem, having the Zoom and others. I think having a 3 and being under the quorum, it may run this in an efficient way.
That makes a lot of sense, and thank you for that, Ms. Hammoud. Let me just ask this question, Mr. Schaefer, your name has been thrown out there, sir, and obviously we admire your input as well. Are you able to serve in the subcommittee, sir?
I'd be able to serve on the subcommittee. I would like to have Ms. Lewis as the recording secretary for it. She did such an excellent job last time. That's really outside of my skill set. So
Okay.
we did a pretty good teamwork on that last go around. So I'm willing to do that.
So for a matter of efficiency and expeditious purposes, I do agree with Ms. Hammoud. I think what we'll do is keep it to 3. Particularly since Dr. Cornell says there's issue 2 with her time as well. So the subcommittee will consist of Mr. Thomas, Ms. Lewis, Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Thomas is to serve as the chair of the committee. Okay, that's set. I think we're moving on. I don't think we need a motion for that. Any other matters properly before this board at this time? One other issue the chair just wants to raise. And I'm going to ask Mr. Longstreet and anyone else who may be able to chime in on this matter. So our website, we have a website for the Wayne County Ethics Board. I would like to know, and I've raised this in the past over the years, whether or not we can some kind of way promote it throughout the county to let people know that we're here. A lot of people I talk to in the Wayne County do not know that we're here, do not know what we do. One of the reasons why I raised that is because of one of the recent email that I sent out with the article for the Wayne County complaint that we received, the Wayne County ethics complaint that we received from the woman regarding a police officer ex-husband who had apparently was trying to have her arrested on some proper charges or something. That complaint came to this board. This was, I believe it was last year, and I think I said it was Mr. Williams that sent it over to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. It was either Mr. Williams or Mr. Domzo. Our main concern was making sure that it was sent to a liaison at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office to make sure that we weren't just handing it off to just somebody for it to go into their inbox or into a trash can and not to be followed up. We did send it over to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office because it was criminal in nature and it was not within the purview of this board. And I believe Mr. Domzo or someone said, I believe the contact at the time was, I think it was Ms. Stevens, Laurel Stevens over there. Apparently we may want to make sure that Mr. Domzo or Mr. Williams followed up, kept the complainant in the loop as to what happened to her complaint. Because you have to understand, people are taking a lot of time to file a complaint. It has to be notarized. They're putting out allegations out here. Oftentimes they call to come and give testimony before this board. So we wanted to make sure that this person who was seeking relief from this board, and while we could not provide it, that they were getting some sort of relief from somewhere. And we did send it over to the prosecutor's office. They did follow up on it, and the recent complaint came down. It was a commander in that article I sent out to everyone. The commander was helping a particular officer have his ex-wife arrested in Detroit, which apparently this was taking place in the Westland, but officers in Detroit was doing this. That commander was subsequently demoted down to captain, and the process is still going on. But I just wanted to note that because that complaint was initially filed with this board. So my question is, I'm just trying to see if there's a possible way, and I think we've mentioned this over the years, a way to let other people know that we're here and what we do. We have our website up. Other than that, I don't think there's any other circulation that we have to let people know about the Wayne County Ethics Board and what we do here. So if someone can chime in and let me know, is there a possible other way to sort of, I don't know, promote the website or some other way that we can let others in the county know that we're here and what we do?
I think there's
Yes, Mr.
I think there's
Longstreet.
multiple ways in which we could approach notifying the public and the community at large that the Wayne County Ethics Board exists. The first one is always the media. Everything works on television. I think a press release indicating that the board does exist, what the board does, and possibly getting a television interview with the chair to let the public know of what we do, who we are, and what our purpose is, would be a good start. The second would be social media. Social media seems to be the prevailing way information is conveyed nowadays, trying to educate the public in regards to what our function would be. So I think that would be another method of doing so. Just to start, I think it's something that should be an ongoing process. It's not something that you're going to, since no one really knows or has a great knowledge of it, I think it's not something that's going to occur overnight. I think it should be an ongoing process of providing the public with notice of our existence.
Yes, Ms. Hamud.
While educating the public and all the residents of Wayne County is important, I think we discussed before is the importance of the Wayne County employees and elected officials to be able to have an annual refresher or attestation that they read and aware of the ethics ordinance. And that they would be able to come, like Mr. Al-Tamimi here today, to be able to provide, like ask for opinion before they act or when in doubt. I think this is very important, and I will be interested to know from the Wayne County, like their HR department, to know, is there such a attestation and is it refreshed annually and with the part of the onboarding of any new employee?
Yes, Ms. Lewis.
Processes of Wayne County, how are the employees?
So much for that, Ms. Lewis. And the chair does believe that there has been press releases made. I think it comes through the commission and the commission, but however, it has been only with specific cases that we've received some information from the commission where they were trying to put out a press release regarding a particular case and what happened, the process with that particular case or complaint. I'm not sure if this board itself actually puts out any, although our prior attorney did work with that commission, that person in the commission who was preparing those press releases and did add the final language before it went out. So I will ask Mr. Longstreet to look into that. I'm not sure if this board has the budget for any sort of social media or any sort of promoting of the website, because again, our website is there, it's just most people don't know about it. I don't think, unless you're in the county, and even some county employees don't know about it.
Through
So,
the chair, this is Tim Johnson, Director of Administration for the county.
yes, Mr. Johnson, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thank you to the
Yes.
board, through the chair.
Yes.
Our commissioners produce newsletters that we probably hit collectively over 300,000 households. And we're heading into newsletter season. We can have our public information staff make mention of the ethics committee, ethics ordinance in these newsletters. So that's a start. Just wanted to make you guys aware of that.
Mr. Johnson, how often does those newsletters go out?
They fluctuate depending on commissioners. They might be twice a year for each commissioner, so like 30 newsletters. They also do electronic newsletters too, so that's another avenue that we can get the word out about the ethics ordinance.
So it's per individual commissioner that sends out their own individual newsletters?
Correct.
And that individual commissioner would choose whether or not to add something in there like that or not?
Correct. I think they would be receptive.
Okay. All right. Would anyone know if this board has the budget to do something like that, to put out a newsletter or either some kind of way promote independently promote the website? I do like, Mr. Johnson, and thank you for your input. I do like the fact that commissioners can put out newsletters and they possibly sometimes mention. I do get a few newsletters from a few of the commissioners. I have never really seen the ethics board mentioned in it. But again, maybe it's just a couple that I've received from those various members. Other members may mention it in their newsletters. Is there a budget to allow for something like that? I think we had talked about this in the past because I think the chair had mentioned possibly some information in the local libraries and things like that. Obviously, that was before this pandemic hit. But is there any money in a budget for this ethics board to do some sort of I don't know, some sort of way of spreading the word, letting people know that we're here, or at least letting people know about the website? If anyone has any information about that, please chime in. And if not, we'll leave it on the table at this time.
Well, through the chair, to my knowledge, I don't believe the ethics ordinance has a budget for items like this.
Mr. Longstreet, if you can work with there's a person that does that in the commission that has done press releases. I forget his name. I'm sure someone can send it over to you. Those press releases have gone out. It should be in the information that you received from Mr. Williams's office. I know he had some input on those various press releases from various cases and complaints that this ethics board has heard. Possibly you can reach out to that person and work with that person at some point. Okay, we're going to move right along. Moving, if there's no further comments on this matter.
Regards to the
Yes,
county
Mr.
employees and whether they receive notice, it appears in the ethics ordinance itself that each county employee has to sign a document stating that they're going to follow the ethics ordinance and given a copy of the ethics ordinance. Now, what happens beyond that, I don't know. It doesn't appear that there's any updating of the process, only that upon the hiring of an employee through the county of Wayne, each county employee signs a declaration saying that they will abide by the ethics ordinance and given a copy of the ethics ordinance. Now, what the person does with that ethics ordinance after they sign this declaration, I don't know. And there's any information in regards to updates on that as well.
Through the chair, this is Ms. Johnson, if I may respond to that.
Yes.
And I was going to wait to public comment, but every year by March 15th, every county employee, contractors, and board members that the ethics ordinance is applicable to, they're required to renew or affirm that they're aware of the ethics ordinance and its requirements on an annual basis. So it is an annual updating of information to remind employees that the ethics ordinance exists and the requirements of that ordinance. So that is done annually by the county. And it just occurred this year on March 15th with the deadline.
I have gotten those emails where it's an email sent out, if I'm not mistaken, an email sent for you. I thought that was for the conflicts of interest or something like that.
Right. And in the beginning, it cites the ethics ordinance in the beginning of it. And the first step in the computer system when you log in is to actually affirm that you've reviewed the ethics ordinance, and it's laid out right in front of you on that screen.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Johnson. Okay, are there any other matters? I think Ms. Lewis, you had a question?
Yes, I think the gentleman, Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
spoke about the newsletter the commissioners send out. My question is, if we were to utilize that avenue, is that content reviewed by the commissioners, or would they just, let us add our content?
They would probably approve what, was submitted.
Okay.
There's their newsletter, so.
So, Mr. Johnson, what you're saying, if this board submitted something to a particular commissioner for to add to their newsletter, that commissioner would add it and send it out in their newsletter?
Yeah, I'm saying they would, but they would also have editorial control over what the message is. You know, I don't think they're going to object to what you guys submit, but they do have the final say as to what the editorial content is for the newsletters.
Do you offhand, Mr. Johnson, know how many commissioners send out newsletters?
All 15, they're not all the same amount of times a year. Some commissioners may submit or publish one newsletter, others may do 2 or 3. So it really fluctuates.
That's something we can look into possibly, possibly preparing something and reaching out to those commissioners to get it into their newsletter.
Yeah, our 2 public information people, Wayne Peel and Jim Toth, don't appear to be on the phone, but I will relay, the interest to them.
Mr. Longstreet, possibly if there's a way you can prepare some language that we could put into a newsletter that can out and something, some language that we can put together that can go out, sort of addressing this board and that we're here and what we do. Nothing extensive, but just pretty much letting people know that we're here and what we do and the matters we tend to try and address. Possibly we can bring that up at our next meeting. If there's no other further matters before this board, I'm going to move right along to, I believe it's item number F, or letter F, which is public comments. If there are any public comments at this time, I'm going to open it up.
Through the chair, all lines have been prompted to unmute.
Did they hear the chair? Are there any public comments at this time? Okay, if there's no other matters before this board, if there's no public comments, the chair is going to move to item G, which is our adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn this session for today? Is it seconded? The motion has been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting for today. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned until, I believe, Wednesday, April, what's the next meeting, Mr. Lizette?
It's April 20th.
April 20th. So this meeting is adjourned to Wednesday, April 20th. Thank you so much for everyone for attending. Dr. Carnell, thank you for being here via Zoom. Everyone who are via Zoom, thank you for being here. Thank you, members, for all your input. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Everyone next week, next month.